Hello and welcome to the Dev Dialog podcast. I'm your host, Liz Nix, and today my guest is Zeb McNeill. Zeb is a full stack engineer, a colleague of mine, and I'd like to say a close personal friend. Zeb, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yay. Okay. I'm so excited. Let's start by having you tell us about your background and how you got into tech.
Yeah, definitely. So it all started many, many moons ago. Right around, I think, 11. I got issued my first computer as like a birthday gift, and it wasn't your typical like Mac or Windows that you would normally expect. It was a very old little compact Presario with some flavor of Linux built into it. So I was completely in over my head. I had no idea what I was doing, what I was looking at. I'm not entirely sure how the computer itself came to be in my family, but it was presented to me as a gift nonetheless. And so I'm like, okay, cool, I'll take it. But that uh, point about the unsurety, it it leads to this part where the user that was already on there was just an unknown user. It wasn't like a default admin. It was just somebody I've never met. I have no idea what's going on with this thing. It is what it is. So I've got, 11 years old, first computer, unknown user, unknown operating system. Uh, I spent a very good several months trying to break into that machine, just trying to figure out how to get into it, how to get user access, before I finally figured out how to like bypass the main user that was on there, get access to the root terminal, and start creating users of my own with root access. And from there, it spiraled into kind of where I'm at today. Shortly after that computer, I took a little bit of an interest in game development. I picked up a early version of one of the Game Maker engines. I think it was Game Maker specifically, just like a very, very early version. I think Game Maker 2 had just come out, or was like 1 point something. Took an interest in that, made a couple small little RPGs, uploaded them to some hosting platform, I think Mediafire, but that's all been shut down because apparently they sent an email out a few years ago, right? Where they're like, hey, everything that you have, if you don't back it up, we're just going to wipe all the data here. And I never got the email. So those games are completely lost to the ether. From there, it's just evolved further, picking up some stuff with Unity, a little bit of Unreal, a little bit of Godot, and then eventually interest in web development. My first web development job was in the arts district of Dallas. It was just a small little 3-person team. One person was in charge of doing the marketing, and then it was me and another developer. She did all the back-end development, and I was in charge of the front end. So just HTML, CSS. I didn't really know JavaScript at the time. I honestly didn't know HTML or CSS at the time either. I'm just like, hey, I've done some coding with Unreal and Unity, but I've never built websites before. And they're like, okay, I think you got the technical chops. Let's see what you can do. So they saw what I could do, and Google was my best friend throughout those 6 months that I was there. I was constantly trying to, figure out, hey, what exactly do these pieces do? After that, it kind of, what's the word I'm thinking of? It inspired a bit of a love for web development and just software development in general. After that point, I ended up taking on a restaurant job, and I did that for I think 5-6 years. It was a very good majority of my work history was in the restaurant industry, picking up whatever small odd job, like freelance jobs that I could get. But for the most part, it was all just restaurant stuff. Worked my way up essentially from the dish pit to manager. So my online handle in a lot of places is dish pit or dish pit dev for that reason. Then eventually I took a coding bootcamp course to really hone in on those skills, try to get better with it, learn as much as I possibly could, because I figured that's the career I wanted to get into. I loved restaurant work. It's great, but it's not something I saw myself doing for a long period of time. So I took that as an opportunity to just break into my dream career. Um, Eventually, I quit my job at the restaurant, pulled out my 401k, lived off of savings and 401k for quite a while, like maybe 6, 7, 8 months, just studying coding full time. Like, wake up in the morning, that's the first thing I would do is start doing courses, classes, building projects, interacting with other students, doing everything I could until like 8, 9 o'clock at night, and then go to sleep, rinse and repeat. Right? It was pretty insane. At one point, my savings started running a little bit low. I had like $100 left to my name, and I'm living in Killeen at the time, right? So I call up a buddy of mine and I'm like, "Hey, I'm running out of cash. Let me crash on your couch. I got this interview as a Amazon delivery driver. I'll do that for a little bit, help you out with rent, whatever." He's like, "Shoot, yeah, man, come on up. Like, I got space. Let's do this. It'll be cool. We'll be roommates." He's an old friend of mine. We worked in the same restaurant together, so it's good dude, really good dude. So I ran up there, took the 3-hour drive, 2.5, 3-hour drive from Killeen back up to Dallas. And I was there for maybe a good 2-3 weeks, right? Because I had the interview the day I got up there, and they're like, "Congratulations, welcome aboard. You got the job. Just come back, I think June 27th, I think it was, for your first day, and we'll start your training." So I'm like, "Okay, cool. Sounds great." So in the 2 or 3 weeks after that interview, it was all just still building out projects, still trying to get interviews with tech companies, still trying to land my first like real tech job beyond just HTML and CSS from many, many years ago. And eventually a recruiter contacts me and he's like, "Hey man, saw your website. I thought it was absolutely hilarious. I've got a couple positions open. Let's get you scheduled for interviews." So I'm like, "Okay, cool. Yeah, let's do that. That sounds great." I was just thrilled that like somebody had seen my website and thought enough of it to reach out to me. So that's good. So he sets me up with one company. Didn't really go very well. They ended up pulling a bait and switch. They're like, "Yeah, we want a junior. We want like someone brand new." And then, "Yeah, we don't want a junior anymore." I'm like, "Okay, it is what it is." Um, then the second company, they set me up with it, and it was like a Shopify gig, and it was just going to be Shopify development, like messing around with the e-commerce fields. I'm like, "Okay, I've done enough Shopify stores, WordPress stores. I'm familiar with it. Should be easy, no problem." So I get sent the project, I do the project, they like the project, and then I get to meet the team. And the team's like, "Hey, so we noticed you have like an interest in development. We happen to have a position opening very soon for this particular role. If that's something you want to do and like kind of segue from Shopify dev to just dev." And I'm like, "You know what? Sure, that sounds great." So I got sent another project. I personally thought I was hot shit with it at the time, but you know how it is when you look back, 6 months later and you're like, "Who wrote this code?" It was atrocious. Looking back, it was definitely very atrocious. Um, but apparently they liked the project enough to give me a shot, and they gave me a shot, and I ended up moving from Dallas on the day I was supposed to start as an Amazon delivery driver, mind you, hightailing it from Dallas down to Austin for my first day. And ever since then, it's just been uphill. So it's kind of the story about how I got into software engineering.
I love the fact that I know so much of that story because I mean, at least in the latter part, I was there for it, and I was
Mhm.
like, "Hey, this guy is gonna be our new developer."
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was amazing. One of the things that came to mind as you were talking about your experience with the boot camp is how similar that felt in ways to how I participated in my college courses,
Mhm.
way back 2005, 2006. We're talking. So um it was a similar grind, but I think probably not as difficult because I was still, I still had that safety net of my parents' home. I was in college. So I wasn't also trying to make rent and bills at the same time. However, I do remember just like waking up, getting to work, trying to finish these projects, and like at times literally crying because I couldn't understand what was going wrong with,
Mhm.
and then it was usually like a couple hours of sleep, and I would wake up and figure out it was something super simple. Like,
Yeah.
and I can't even give you an example of what that is. It's analogous to the missing semicolon, but at that time it was probably like exported to a different file name than I anticipated, which brings me to my point, which is the way that I was taught in that educational environment prepared me less for my actual eventual career and more for understanding the ways that I need to learn things and how I process projects. And I'm wondering if that was similar for you, or more succinctly, what percent of what you learned in the boot camp was useful versus the percent that you have self-taught along the way in a professional environment.
Gotcha. I definitely think so. The more that I talk to other devs that have had, different upbringings and how they got into development, I've noticed there's a bit of a pattern with the self-taught and bootcamp path versus like the traditional, 4-year degree path. For the 4-year degree, I typically notice a lot of times the developers aren't as prepared for the job itself, but they understand the theory and the reasoning why a lot more with much better in-depth detail. Whereas the boot camps and self-taught, they're going directly for learning what they need to learn to be job ready without so much as having a full understanding of what's going on behind the scenes. Um, so and I feel like that's definitely had a little bit of a hindrance in some of my understanding as far as code goes, because I've seen things where it's like I have no idea how this works. I just know this is what it is that I need to do the thing that I'm trying to achieve, without having that full understanding of what's going on basically beneath everything. Um, so I would say it's a little bit of a flip flop between the 4-year degree versus the self taught. So on the one hand, you're like I said, you get the theory, but not so much the job readiness. And then the other one prepares you for job readiness, but you have a much bigger lack of understanding of the theory. So,
Yeah, calling it a flip flop, I think, is very accurate. I know that in my case, sometimes it's a boon to have like all this like knowledge, historical information of, the internet began and then we wrote HTML, and, to start from like those levels and move forward to understand why things are the way they are now. Sometimes that makes me a little more quick to know exactly where I need to look to find the answer I need for the problem at hand. Other times, it makes me want to like, oh no, there's a gap in my historical knowledge. I don't know how I got here. And I like have a meltdown, and I'm looking through documentation that's like way tangential, way outside of the field of what the actual specific problem is. And then when I finally come to my senses and get to the point of what I'm actually trying to do, I find the answer very quickly. So it is kind of a double-edged sword in that way.
oh yeah, definitely. It's great example. You mentioned the kind of the say the missing semicolon. When you were trying to learn how to code, and it was one of those just abstract things. For me, it was dealing with objects. I struggled so hard to figure out like what exactly is this? How does this work? And basically just to understand the concepts behind it. So it's little tangential going back to previous discussion, but thought I'd throw that out there.
I think that's a good segue into like Well, understanding what an object is was one of the big things that brought me from I know how to make things look pretty in a browser to I'm a programmer.
Hmm.
I know how to program was understanding basically data architecture and the way that things can be nested. And yeah, I think I understood on an intuitive level way before I had words to put to it that an array is just a special kind of object. But at this point now, like I can look at anything with object notation and kind of understand what's happening there. Like, and that's been developed over, God, what year is it? Like almost a 20-year career. Like, and I'm finally at a place where, well, not fine. I have been for a little bit, but it's nice to be able to have that innate sense of the data structures that you're working with when you're doing these things. And now that I think about it, this is the first time that I've actually put this together. A CSS declaration is actually an object.
Yeah. Yeah, now that I think about it, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
It just occurred to me right now in this moment. It's groundbreaking.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's just an object. You've got the keys and the values, and it's got a title or a name, a pointer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Interesting.
imagine that.
Yeah. All right. So moving forward, like, what are you working on now that's really exciting to you?
Oh God.
You don't have to just pick one. I know you're working on a lot of things. Feel free to
Yeah.
tell us about as many as you want.
I was about to say where to even start. So there's two really big ones that I'm like very excited for. One of which is a programming language of just my own design. It's one of those projects that I've always kind of wanted to, build, but I've never really had good instruction or really just an idea of how to start. And so I've been working on that for maybe like a month or two now. Just part-time, nights and weekends, whenever I can get a little bit of extra code time in to make some progress. I initially started off for this project. Well, actually, there's two kind of starts to this project. One, I started off with I think JavaScript to just use that as the base language and then turn it into something else. But I wanted to just try and experiment with it with ChatGPT because everyone's like, "Oh my goodness, it's going to replace developer jobs." It really doesn't. It'll give you. It gave me like a very basic outline of, hey, here's what you need to build, and I'll give you like some sample code for it. But after that, you're really on your own because it's a massively complex project, and it's not something that AI can handle at all. So I realized very quickly, I was like, yeah, no, this is not going to help me out at all. So I did some digging. I found a couple of books that teach you step by step how to build a programming language from scratch using a language called Go, which is I believe Go was developed by Google. So it's, got a very good community around it. But you build a language in Go. You can, of course, build it however you want, but it starts off as an interpreted language, similar to, say, how Python works. You'll end up coding up a REPL, and then you can work with your language in the REPL that you coded. And that was basically book one. I'm currently chewing through book two now. I'm like barely into it, but it takes what you've built for the interpreted language and converts it into a compiled language. So you have the best of both, which is exactly what I'm looking for in a language. So I can have either an interpreted set of instructions or compiled programs. And it's a very fun project, very, very fun project. I've got it open source, so it's going to be one of those things where like anybody can just chime in, make edits, contribute, do what they want, use it. It's already technically fully available. The interpreter, you can go to the website, download the interpreter, mess around with it. It installs directly onto your system path. So when you install it, it works basically just like any other language, like say Node, right? You know, if you install Node and then you open your terminal and type in Node and it drops you in the Node REPL, same thing with this language. You type in the command and you're in the REPL. So it's great. But I haven't touched that for a few weeks because I've been working on this other project that I'm super excited for. So me and a buddy of mine, we noticed that there was a surprising lack of AI automation in one specific field, right? We've had AI come for writers. You know, writers are freaking out over ChatGPT. Programmers are freaking out over Devin. Artists, you know, they're losing their mind over Midjourney and Stable Diffusion. Just and all these other fields. There was recently one actually that just announced, maybe 4 or 5 days ago. These guys are building an AI tool to replace interviewers. And dude was getting absolutely dragged all over Twitter. Almost everyone in his comments were like, no, this is horrible. You know, interviewing is a two-way street. Like, you're trying to figure out about me as a candidate, but I need to know about you as a company. And I can't do that if I'm talking to a robot, right? So anyway, all these AI tools coming for all these industries except for one. The one industry where the average salary for these individuals is $800,000 a year. So when people talk about using these AI tools as cost saving measures, right? It's not a cost savings if you're cutting out your, you know, $50, $70, $80,000 graphic designer or your $90,000 developer. That's not a cost savings. A cost savings is replacing your $800,000 CEO or your $500,000 a year CMO with AI. So that's kind of what we're doing now. We're building it as sort of the funniest possible Uno reverse card that we could ever achieve. And the backend's completely done. I do want to make a couple more tweaks to it, but otherwise the backend's pretty much finished. We're doing some front end work now to finish up like the interaction layer for it, and then give the website a little bit more polish before we do like a full official announcement. But it's just been making posts on Twitter and, you know, talking about it in those communities and like, oh, you're doing this, you're replacing this guy, you're replacing your writer with AI. Joke's on you, bud, because I just replaced you with AI. So
this podcast episode is actually going to come out 3 weeks from Monday.
Mhm.
So, well, let's see, maybe 2 weeks. So Monday, I'm dropping episode 2. The following Monday, episode 3, and then the following Monday is you. Do you think it'll be ready to go by then? And do you feel comfortable saying the name? We can edit it out if you're not ready at the time. But like, do you want? Is there anywhere to point people, or will we just put it in the description if it's ready when this launches?
Yeah. Either way, we can put it in the description. We have a website up and ready to go. It's not, you know, completely polished, but it's just kind of like a basic landing page of, oh, hey, here's what the project is. Big coming soon button or text in the top right, just letting you know it's not really ready, but we're here. We're, you know, working on it. We're getting there. But it's under activateatom.com, and then I'll send you the link, and we can put that in the description as well.
I love that. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you decided to name it Adam.
Thank you. Yeah, I do also to point out that unlike Cognition Labs with Devin, who if you go to their, I don't know if it's still active, but if you go to their careers page, they're hiring a software engineer despite having an AI software engineer. We are actively utilizing Adam as our CMO. So we're constantly like already dog fooding it. We know it works. We know it could do the job.
I love that, dog food from the start. And if it's not solving a problem that you have, then how do you know it works?
Exactly.
Wonderful. I'm so excited for Adam. I have been waiting for Adam. I can't wait. I'm so excited.
No, it's definitely a very exciting project.
What if it takes off? What if it
Mm,
really then where do you go?
I mean, if it takes off and it justifies, having to work on it and support it full time, then I would be more than happy to do that. We actually have to finish up our application in the next day or two, but we're focusing on applying to Y Combinator for it, just because it's an AI product. They seem to be funding a lot of AI stuff recently, so we're like, hey, worst that YC can say is no. Best case scenario, they're like, hey, here's $500,000, work on the project, please. So fingers crossed.
Nice. And just to be clear, if they
Mhm.
say no, you're still going to work on it,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not tangential on YC's acceptance at all.
Good. Good. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, it would make it a lot
Not
easier, but
not that I don't love all the C-suite people that I work under currently. I think they're amazing. They're
they're good
great.
people.
They worked hard. They deserve what they've got, but at the same time, if they have cheaper solutions to do what I do, I'm also going to need cheaper solutions to do what they do,
Mm-hmm. And
right?
it's great because then you can get, for small teams, small companies that maybe they want, say, a CMO or a CTO, CFO, whatever, but they don't have the salary to support that. Adam's a
Mhm.
great replacement for that because then you can get, the jobs and the decision and everything that you need without having to spend an exorbitant salary supporting a C-suite salary. You can flush out your whole team with it and get that knowledge that you need. So it's
Well,
really good.
let me ask you this. Does Adam specialize in a single like what I don't know the difference between a CMO and a CTO, or like what is his specialty now, and how hard is it to split it off into different ones? Because what a CTO does and knows is way different from what a CMO does and knows, or a CFO for that matter. And when it comes to that level of specialty and decision making, you really want to have some expertise behind it, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. So it can be used, for any of those levels. The initial release that we're going to do is just going to be a very general, like consultant, so like a chief consulting officer, kind of
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
general decision maker, general guidance. But eventually, as we make sure that the other like specialized fields work better, then we'll start releasing those as well. But in its current state, yes, it definitely can do that. Like I said, we're actively utilizing it as our CMO. So we've got it, working on marketing plans for us to follow, and we go to it for decisions on exactly what to do for our marketing, and it gets the job done.
I realize this might be confidential, but what benchmarks are you using to measure the success of Adam as a CMO?
That we're not actively measuring at the moment, possibly just because we're focused too much on the development aspect.
Mm.
But I guess the biggest measure of success for it as a CMO would just be how well the marketing works, and if people start getting information, or not information, but start learning about Adam as a whole. Because any marketing that we do is going to be, I guess, at the instruction of Adam itself. So instead of
Mhm.
us just making a decision saying, hey, we want to run ads and do this, like, nope, we're going to go to Adam. Adam's going to come up with the like exact guidance for how we want to structure the ads, when we want to run them, where we want to run them. And if it works, it works.
And then, so by that token, it's really just traditional like engagement and revenue, right? Like, are people buying
Effectively.
the thing at
Effectively,
the
yeah.
end of the day, bottom
Yeah.
line? But in between revenue and engagement, would you say that you're relying on Adam to measure Adam's success?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, not at all.
I'm sorry that I'm not trying to be like gotcha here. I'm just curious. Like it just occurred to me, how do you know? And then so with marketing, that's like that really does equate to like success equals more sales.
Mm,
With things like a CTO and a CFO and even a COO, those metrics are going to be a little more industry defined. And it almost seems like you would need a human expert in those fields to help you guide how to measure your success with the
mhm.
AI version of the same.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's especially because it's not fully autonomous at the moment. It'd be great to have that, happen. We'll just call that a stretch goal. But for now, it relies very heavily on a one-to-one interaction. So if you're not interacting with it, it's not going to give you any information. And so, like you said, because of that, you want to have somebody in place that can interact with it and know at least well enough to know what to say and what information to extract from it in order to be effective.
Right. Right. So again, we're seeing like maybe the rise of the prompt engineer as a
Essentially,
career. Yeah.
essentially, yeah.
So I guess that brings me to the next like guidepost in this conversation, and that's like you've touched on it a little. How do you feel about the current state of technology in our
It's,
industry?
I would say honestly, it's a bit of a wildfire at the moment. Kind of a wild west as well. It is very rough. If you're trying to get into the industry as, say, a new developer, you're really going to have an incredibly difficult time pulling it off. The main reason, we have the boot camps, of course, and they're pumping out new developers and their grandmothers every single week.
Hey.
Fresh flood, fresh flood of new devs. But on top of that, we've also had a bunch of rounds of layoffs, which kind of is a personal annoyance because it's like, why are all these companies seeing record profits, but they can't afford to keep their teams? So in conjunction with this flood of new developers into the market, you also now have an army of senior developers, very, very talented senior developers to contend with. And then it's just little you, right? So I've seen job listings that have tens of thousands of applicants for the one job, and that is so much further than what it was 2-3 years ago when I first started the job search to get into the field. It was maybe 1,000 applicants per job, and now we're hitting tens of thousands of applicants per job. It's absolutely awful. So the main thing really is being able to specialize into something. So instead of just, oh yeah, you're a junior developer, no, you want to you want to take a niche, find a niche down a little bit, and then niche down a lot more. That way you can specialize and stand out in that particular field. So if you're going into, say, graphics engineering, you're only going to have to contend with a couple hundred developers per job, as opposed to, say, React development. You've got tens of thousands of developers just in the area alone, all of which know React because it's kind of the de facto standard at this point. So definitely niche down, but it's very rough. It is a rough market. I feel like it should stable out eventually, maybe in the next year or two. But right now, it's going to be incredibly, incredibly difficult as a new developer to get into it.
Do you have any advice as far as discovering what your niche should be if you're just starting out? Like, I remember over the past maybe 5 years, 2 to 5 years, like the big question on Twitter is, I'm a new developer, what should I learn? And the de facto answer is like JavaScript. But that pretty much has brought us to the situation that you've just described.
Mhm.
So I think that it's important to identify what it is about you specifically that brought you to this goal, and how do you figure that out? Like, what's going to keep you in it for the long haul and give you the best career you can have?
Oh yeah. I definitely would say to just instead of trying to pick, say, whatever language or tech stack is the de facto standard or the most popular at the time. Everyone's learning JavaScript and everyone's learning Python. Everyone's doing web development. Instead of doing that, yeah, I get it. A lot of people get into the career for the money. Absolutely, I understand. We've all got bills to pay. I wouldn't get into a career because it doesn't pay anything. Um, but with that said, I feel like instead of following what everybody else is doing, just go for what you want to do. Because then instead of say maybe you want to do game development, right? Sure, it's not going to be as competitive as web development, and the pay is probably not going to be as good. Game developers typically get paid a little bit less than web developers. The hours aren't as great. You have a lot of big name companies that don't really treat their employees very well, like say Blizzard. But you're going to have a much easier time getting that job if you specialize into that. And the best way to do that is to just do what interests you the most. So if you want to do game development, if that's where your heart is and you want to follow that as your path in a tech, absolutely go for it. You want to get into, say, systems programming. I see so many people that say, oh, C is a dead language. C++ is a dead language. It's really not. A majority of our systems nowadays run off of C++ or C. Almost every single computer system you interact with can use C and is programmed with C. A lot of very popular software, say the Adobe Photoshop or any of the Adobe products, use C and C++. So it's not going to hinder you at all. It will be a lot easier for sure, to learn JavaScript, get into it that way. C is definitely a harder language, but if that's something that you're passionate about, go for that, because not too many people are using it, despite it being a very prevalent standard in our industry.
I think that's really good advice because, well, it's good advice to a point, right? Because the jobs for C and C++ are fewer, but the competition is far less as well, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, if if all 10 people who are going to listen to this show went and pursued C or C++, it would be fine. But if thousands of people did it, then that would be another one where it would just get oversaturated very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that said, like, if you like it and it speaks to you, go for it.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's chase the money, absolutely. Pay your bills, get your bag. But I feel like you should at least try to do something that speaks to your heart and soul as much as you can, because you're going to have a much easier time doing it. It's always nice to be able to get paid for what it is you love to do. I'm very lucky to be one of those people. I love what I do, and being paid for it, it's the gravy. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the concept that when you get good at learning programming languages, you can translate that skill of learning a language to any language?
I would say it's a bit of a yes and no. The main thing isn't so much the languages, but the patterns, and also being able to learning how to learn and learning how to problem solve. Those are the two biggest things. Because yes, you could just Google the syntax, see what the equivalent is, but which is kind of actually, yeah, that kind of defeats the point I was going to make. That's exactly what it is. As long as you know the patterns, you're going to be fine. It's so JavaScript was my first like full language that I learned how to do and dedicated myself full time to picking up. But ever since, after that, every other language that I've tried learning has just come that much easier to me because I've already learned, like, what are the patterns to achieve this? What steps do I need to take to figure out how to solve this problem? So I think it's definitely going to be a lot easier to pick up those other languages for most people after you've mastered your first.
Hmm. Do you think there's any particular are of the languages you have learned?
Mhm.
Which one do you think has lent itself the most to understanding broader concepts of programming that made it easier to learn subsequent languages?
Mm, honestly, JavaScript, but that's really only because that's what I've got the most experience in. So it's had a much larger hand in my learnings going forward. Um,
Mhm. I think that's
currently,
fair. I would say PHP for me, and
yeah.
by the same token, because it was like literally where I understood the structure of a function and how that reacts with you know
Mhm.
programmatic objects.
Oh yeah. Yeah, everything after that is just learning the intricacies of the other language. So like functions in, say, JavaScript, they don't really work the same as functions in Rust. And the syntax is a bit different, but as long as you know the patterns of, hey, what is a function? How can I use it? Then you could just take the steps to figure out what you need to do to apply that knowledge with a new language. So
Mhm.
yeah, definitely JavaScript for sure.
That's great. What do you think about maybe a younger generation who is coming through having their main programmatic experience being in um, game development with more open source platforms like Roblox or Minecraft where they're making mods and stuff. So like what do you think if you get really good at that, say in your tweens and teens, do you think that could translate to a career in programming?
I definitely feel like it very well could. There've been plenty of folks that have just really done game modification. They built plenty of mods for, say, Skyrim or Minecraft or what have you, that have found out they love what it is they do. It started off as more than just, or started off as just modifying the game they love. They're like, hey, I want this feature in this game. I'm going to make it myself. And then that evolved into, hey, this is actually pretty fun, making these games, making these mods. Let me expand that a little bit further. And, I've seen people go from just modders to being in the game industry full time, like as their career. So it definitely has a lot of prevalence in your future career.
I think that's a interesting. I mean, it kind of distills it down to an idea for me, which is that first you need to be able to recognize the problem you want to solve. And then you have to have the wherewithal to figure out how to solve it with code. And it
Hmm.
doesn't matter what language it is. But once you have a taste for doing that, you're not going to want to stop. You're going to want
Yeah.
to solve every problem with code. And many of them you can, but some of them need therapy. But that aside, for the most part, God, maybe even those therapy ones. Now that I think about it. Anyway, I digress. I think that is the thing. If this is a career you want to pursue, identify the problems you want to solve and then solve them with code. Doesn't matter
Hmm.
what language you choose. Just figure it out.
Yeah.
And then do that over and over and over again. And then you're going to be hireable.
Okay. That's definitely a really good approach. Just taking the problem you want to solve and pursuing it that way, or just following what you're most interested in and pursuing whatever steps there are that way. So it's either one. I feel like is a very good method to get you into the career as a whole, as opposed to just, hey, what's the most popular language? I'm going to learn that just because that's what everybody else is doing. that
Yeah.
kind of leads to the flood in the market that we have now. I mean, that with economic situations and all that going on too.
Right.
But
We have seen that not work out so well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, so it's kind of a little bit of a bleak landscape that we're looking at right now. React devs are a dime a dozen,
Hmm.
and that price is going down every day. So, what are you looking forward to for the future?
So right now I am going through a kind of a self-paced boot camp. It's called boot.dev. Um, it teaches specifically backend development. Um, and so because I've been doing full stack for a minute, but I've never really had an opportunity to flex my backend development skills as much as I would like. And so this gives me a chance to kind of just do that. I'll pick up a couple new languages. I've never really worked with Python all that much, and my Go is a bit rusty. So this is this will help with that a lot. And then I guess just taking it from there and getting more into the software engineering side as opposed to just web development. I love web development, been doing it for a couple years now, but I would also love to do more software, like hardcore, executables, systems programming. I absolutely would love to pursue that. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to at the most.
Do you think that will eventually lead to the same problem where you find yourself in an oversaturated market? Because I mean, just from a little bit of experience in job hunting, it seems like a lot of people are making that exact same transition right now.
Maybe. I'm also hoping that I can kind of just jump over whatever that obstacle is ahead of time. I was lucky enough to be able to do that for web development. I got in, I feel like at a very, very good time. And then maybe months after I was able to break into the industry and like finally break into it, then I started seeing things devolve into what they are now. So I'm hoping if I can hammer this down correctly, I can at least get into that industry or start pursuing it a little bit more before it's too late and before it's insanely difficult.
What would be your dream? Like ideal, everything goes perfectly your way. What does that look like?
For me, some kind of a startup that pays my bills. I don't have to really answer to anybody. I don't have investors because it's all bootstrapped, so I don't have to worry about like answering to the shareholders or the stakeholders. It's hey, I got a team of people. We make the decisions here, running everything. Our bills are paid. I'm good. Buy a little plot of land, maybe 50 acres deep in the mountains, and then I'll just disappear for the next 20 years. That would be great. But overall, just being able to start something that gets my bills paid for, that would be pretty cool. Don't have to worry about my team getting liquidated or the business going under. Just having that financial stability that I'm in control of, or me and a team are in control of. Oh, absolute golden goal right there.
Mm-hmm. I agree. That is kind of that's a noble goal. There's nothing wrong with just looking for that sense of stability.
Mhm.
And I believe you can get there. I really do. I think you have what it takes. I think you have a spirit that is open to trying new things and following those passions to the point where they can come to fruition. I'm super excited for what's going to happen with Adam, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you do next.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Unless you have anything else you want to plug or shout out, I think we can go ahead and wrap there.
I think it's just about everything.
Great. Well, thank you again so much for making the time to talk with me today. This is going to be a really great episode. I'm excited to air it, and I will see you on Monday.
Cool. I'll see you on Monday.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.